Hello and welcome to Gavia Aimer Gaming. This is Grant and I'm back with another Warhammer Fantasy Battle Report. Today we've got a somewhat of a unique game. We're playing Triumph and Treachery with end times rules and 4,000 points per team. I'm playing the host of the Eternity King with Malekith, the Eternity King version, against a Undead Legions with Nagash and also a Legions of Chaos with the Glotkin. So should be interesting. We'll get into it. Okay, we'll start with my elf list, going from left to right. I've got 5 warlocks, and behind the warlocks on the sort of left-hand side of the screen is a bolt thrower. Beside the warlocks is a unit of 38 executioners with a witch hag. She's got witch brew, which gives them frenzy, and also in that unit is a high elf noble BSB with the banner of the world dragon. Behind the executioners is a frostheart phoenix. And then in the middle of the screen, going from the front back, we've got 10 witches, which are being proxied by the night goblins. Behind them is another bolt thrower, and then 10 more witches being proxied with those Empire swordsmen. And behind those, we've got a unit of 41 witches with full command, armor-piercing banner, Helbron, and a hag on a cauldron. Behind the big block of witches is Malekith on his dragon, and then to the right hand side we've got 5 more warlocks and 20 dark shards with the flaming banner. Here's just a shot of the left side of the army, and then a picture of the right side of the army as well. And then just to take you through the Undead Legions list, we've got from left to right 54 Graveguard. Along the back is the Mortis Engine, Nagash, and in front of Nagash, a Casket of Skulls and the Hyro Titan. And then along the front from left to right is 20 Tomb King Skeleton Archers with a level 4 Necromancer there on the left hand side. 49 Vampire Skeletons. And in the tower is 20 more Tomb King Skeleton Archers, and then behind the tower, you can sort of see them, is 45 Crypt Ghouls. And here we just have a view of the Undead army looking down the right-hand side. And lastly, to take you through the Chaos Legion, going from left to right in the front is 2 Beasts of Nurgle, the Glotkin. Then we've got 48 Plague Bearers of Nurgle, and in there are 2 level 1 Heralds of Nurgle as well. 2 more beasts, and then 24 Bloodletters of Khorne with a herald, and a Skull Cannon of Khorne. And then behind the Glotkin, right at the top of the screen, is a second Skull Cannon, a unit of 3 Plague Drones, and behind the Bloodletters is Orgoth's Demon Spew. Behind him is 3 more drones, and behind all that is a Hell Cannon. And here's just a close-up of the Glotkin. He's a little bit of a work in progress right now, but certainly looking very good. And here we have a shot of the entire table. So we've got the elf list there on the bottom left-hand side, the undead in the middle at the top, and then the chaos bottom right. So evenly spread out, really quite intimidating looking at both those armies, sort of one on either side. But I'm sure all 3 players felt the same. And here's a shot of the table from the other side. So in TNT we've got the random turn movement, and I get the first turn. So first thing I do is pass my frenzy check from those night goblins, which are witches in the forest there. Malekith uses his Incarnate of Shadow rule, which gives 1 unit within 12 inches a free 20-inch movement, which counts as ethereal. So I was able to move that small unit of witches up in front of the executioners just to provide a little bit of a speed bump for anything that wants to come in there. And then I also use move my warlocks up just to get them in range of the Chaos army. In Magic, I chose Chaos as my enemy and cast a Fulcrum to give Malekith a ward save. I was a little bit worried about the cannon shots since they all count as magical from the demons, because Malekith only has a 2-up ward save versus non-magical attacks. So this gives him a 3-up ward save while he's standing on the Fulcrum. Shooting unfortunately did nothing. I had also targeted the Chaos player as my enemy, but wasn't able to get anything through. So Chaos Legion got the next turn, and he tried to charge the Plague Bearers into the tower to go after those Skeleton Archers, but failed and lost 1 to stand and shoot. The beasts on the far right, his far right, up at the top of the screen, moved up a little bit. And then on this side, going up against the Elves, he moved the beasts around a little bit, moved his corn bloodletters and the cannon up, and then reformed his line in the second row just to get it ready for later on in the game. In Magic, he chose Undead as his enemy, and first thing he did was cast a Fulcrum for the Glotkin. He was concerned again with a limited ward save that he might be target of some shooting and taken down early in the game, so this gives him a good healthy ward save. And then in the rest of Magic, he used the End Times Nurgle spell, cast it, got it off with Irresistible Force, but only was able to kill 8 ghouls, and actually took no damage from the miscast. Unfortunately, did need to kill 10 in order to get a Great Unclean One. In shooting, he targeted the Elves, but both his skull cannons actually rolled a 1 to wound. One was against the Frostheart Phoenix, and one was against a Bolt Thrower. He hit them, but rolled a 1 both times to wound. And then the Hell Cannon, which he targeted on the Executioners, drifted off onto the edge of the large Witch block, but was only able to kill 1. So we move on to Undead turn 1. There was really no movement. Magic, he chose Chaos as his enemy, and again he cast a Fulcrum. And then he was able to summon 5 Hex Wraiths and a Black Coach. The Chaos player, a little bit of side dealing, let both those spells through when the Undead player said he was going to place them over on the side towards the Elves. In shooting, he used his Skeleton Archers to target the Warlocks and killed 3. So into round 2, and it's Chaos that gets the first turn. Movement versus the Elves. He charged the Warlocks that fled and ended up just there in front of the Frostheart Phoenix. He then redirected those Bloodletters into the small unit of Witches. And then he moved the rest of his lines up towards the Elves as well. And here we just have a shot of the table up from the side. It really gives you a good idea of the vast amount of models that were on the board, and sitting back in one little corner looking at armies on both sides again was quite nerve-wracking. Didn't really know which army to attack first or how to proceed. In Magic, he chose the Undead as his opponent, and from the Reign of Chaos table from the Winds of Magic, he was able to raise 14 Plague Bearers. He did say shortly after placing these models that he should have turned them so that they would be in a position to charge the Bolt Thrower, but he had placed them here, so it was a little too late. In shooting, he killed 4 of the archers in the tower, and one of the cannons did a single wound on Nagash. In close combat, he was able to kill the Witches without much trouble and overran into the Executioners. And here we have just the shot of the board after Chaos turn 2. And here's a shot of the table from the other side. So we move on to Undead turn 2. No charges in this case. He did move his Hex Wraiths up a little bit. And in Magic versus the Chaos player, he raised his ghouls back up to full strength and healed the wound on Nagash. In shooting, he did 2 wounds to the beast that you see there, right there on the left-hand side of the screen. So with no close combat, we move on to Elf turn 2. I didn't get a good picture of the movement phase for this turn, so this is a picture from slightly earlier on in the game, but I wanted to show you those witches that are in that forest there, sort of right in the middle of the screen. They charged into the 2 beasts that are just behind the tower. And in the rest of movement, I flew Malekith around to face the Hex Wraiths and to hold up the left flank. In Magic, I targeted the Chaos player and cast Purple Sun from the Warlocks that are just behind these Witches. It flew right through the Witches into both the Beasts and then into the Orgots and one of the Flies. I was able to kill both the Beasts and the Fly, but the Witches and Orgots passed their initiative test. And here's the landing spot for the Purple Sun after it bounced over and through the unit. In Magic, I was also able to cast Enfeebling Foe on the Bloodletters that are in combat with the Executioners and reduce their strength by 2. And in close combat with the Executioners and the Bloodletters, Executioners were able to kill all except for 3 of the Bloodletters. And with only 3 attacks back at -2 strength, I didn't take a single wound, so I didn't have to roll on the Banner of the World Dragon. So that is still a secret to the Chaos player, which is important because all of his demons have magical attacks. With that, we move into Chaos turn 3, and he charges this small unit of witches with both Orgots and his Plague Bearers. This unit of Plague Bearers that was earlier raised from the Reign of Chaos table charges into the Frostheart Phoenix. And he charged the flies into this unit of Warlocks. In Magic, the Reign of Chaos table produces 12 more Plague Bearers, and he placed them right here in front of the other Bolt Thrower. He also reduced the stats on the witches that were in combat with Orgots, both to weapon skill and initiative 1, so I need 6s to hit, and I also don't get any rerolls. And with that, he has no problems killing all 10 of those witches, and Orgots overruns into the 2 Warlocks that were shot earlier by the skeleton archers. The Plague Bearers, though, were not able to make it. They only moved up 3 inches, and this sets up a really great flank charge for my Executioners into Orgots. So here's a shot of the board after Chaos turn 3, and you can see how those Executioners are well placed to charge into the flank of Orgots. And in Undead turn 3, he tried to charge those Graveguard into Malekith, but I played a Triumphant Treachery card that forced him to choose the Chaos player as his enemy for movement. So instead, he charges his large unit of skeletons into the beasts that are right there beside the tower. In Magic, I also played another card that prevented Nagash from casting any spells in the phase. Here's a close-up of the charge on the beasts, and a shot of the board just showing the rest of Undead movement. And a quick picture of the table from the other side. Shooting from the Tomb King skeleton archers killed 1 of the Executioners. And in close combat, the skeletons were able to do 1 wound on the beasts, and were able to win the combat through just the static combat resolution. But the beasts of Nurgle were able to stick around. The demon Chaos player chose Nurgle as to be the god, the Ascended God at the beginning of the game, so there's no break and no instability. They're just sitting there unbreakable. So in Elf turn 3, I charged the Executioners into the flank of Orgots. Now, keep in mind with Triumphant Treachery that when the Undead player charged into his skeletons into that beast combat and chose the Chaos player as his enemy, the combat between Orgots and those 2 Warlocks, they actually push back out of combat. So this gave the opportunity for Orgots, or the decision for Orgots, whether he wanted to stay and take that charge or flee. He was really torn, wasn't sure what he wanted to do, so in the end he actually chose to flee. It was really a direct roll-off on the dice because I was 5 inches away, so it was his dice versus mine. He rolled a 3, and so I caught him, and this is where they ended up. And then in the rest of movement, I used Malekith's Shadow Rule to move the large block of witches over there in front of the flies and the cannon, and then flew Malekith away from the Graveguard to where you see him there. I thought it really best to focus on the Chaos side of the board. I thought I had a good shot here at cleaning up some good points, and then would swing around after to deal with the Undead. And since those Warlocks were no longer in combat, they were able to turn around, and I figured I would use them to cast some magic on these Graveguard. And I didn't really have anything to do with these archers, the crossbowmen, so I left them down here at the bottom. Hopefully maybe get some shots off, whittle down that large unit of Graveguard between the magic and the shooting, and then maybe they'd be able to redirect something before it was able to come back into the rear of my lines. In Magic, I wasn't able really to get anything through, and then shooting from the crossbowman killed 5 or 6 Graveguard, nothing too important. And here's just a shot of the whole table after turn 3. So we move on to turn 4, and it's getting pretty late at night at this point, so this was going to be the last round of the game, so hopefully not too disappointing, but we'll take you through the turn 4. Undead got the first turn, and he charged his Graveguard into the crossbowman. I was able to kill 6 with the stand and shoot. And here's just a picture of that combat. He then tried to charge the hex race that are beside the Graveguard there into the bolt thrower. You can just see at the bottom of the screen the two crewmen of the bolt thrower, but he failed that charge and stopped 1 inch away from his unit. In Magic, he chose the Chaos player as opponent, and he raised back up the Graveguard that had killed from the stand and shoot. He also was able to summon a Terrorgeist, which he placed here in the middle of the board. And then this is looking from the back of his line, so this is actually on the far left-hand side of the line over by where the Glotkin was. He raised up 3 Vargheists. Not much to say in shooting. He was able to kill the 2 Warlocks that had turned around to magic him, and so he got those points. In close combat against those crossbowmen, he killed all but 4, but I actually rolled double 1s for Insane Courage, so they stick around and do their job in holding up the Graveguard, preventing them from swinging around, if we were going to play later, more rounds swinging around into the rear of my line. I got the next turn, and I chose to charge my Executioners into his unit of Plague Bearers. And I charged my Witches into the flies that were there. You can see them right now at the top of the screen. They chose to flee, and so I redirected into this cannon. Malekith's Incarnate of Shadow rule again used here to pull the crossbowmen out of combat with the Graveguard, which gave the Graveguard a free reform. You can't really see them, but they're right between where you see the Malekith model on the right hand side of the screen and the Frostheart Phoenix. So hopefully that will allow me to preserve those points. In Magic, I tried to cast the Dark Elf End Times spell Oblivion, and the Chaos player played a card that caused it to go with irresistible force if it was failed. I had 5 dice, so I may have got it off anyway, but I chose just to throw 1 to make sure it was failed, so that it would go with irresistible force. This may not have been the smartest move from the Chaos player, because I was able to kill Nagash, and that gave me a huge lead in points, but it was a fun way to sort of bring the game to a close. For some reason, Helbron here failed to kill the Hell Cannon. He actually rolled very, very well with his 5-up ward saves, and then she managed to get killing blowed by the crew. So there's some points for the Chaos team. The Executioners and the Plague Bearers, that was a battle that was going to go on forever between the Banner of the World Dragon. He didn't really get any wounds through, and with all those Plague Bearers there, with them being unbreakable, it was going to take me a long time to get through them. So that was going to be a long battle. So into Chaos, turn 4, on the left side of the screen, he charged those Plague Bearers into the Bolt Thrower. The Plague Bearers here in the middle of the screen charged the crossbowmen that I had pulled out of combat, and they fled up towards the middle of the screen behind Malekith, and then he also charged these flies on the right hand side of the screen into this bolt thrower. And here's just a picture of that last combat. I think this is a pretty awesome picture. These flies that had fled from the witches earlier on have rallied. Here's one dead bolt thrower from the Plague Bearers, and here's a second dead bolt thrower from the flies. And this is the last picture of the game. The witches were able to finish off the Hell Cannon, and they turned to face the flank of the Plague Bearers. But that's where we called it. Elves had a big lead after killing Nagash, but I would have charged the witches at the flies first. They probably would have fled, and then I would have redirected into the Plague Bearers. I'm not sure if I could have got through them at all with 2 more turns, but quite possible with all those witches attacks and the Executioners. Probably would have charged the Phoenix in there as well, just to make them -1 strength and always strikes last. I think for the most part I would have kept Malekith out of combat, so I probably would have flown him away from the Graveguard. And for the rest of the board, I think the Glotkin probably would have picked some points up on the top of the table there, and maybe some points from shooting from the undead. Skeleton archers could have picked up some points here and there. Other than that, I think that was it. I don't think the other 2 opponents were going to be able to collect enough points to make up for all the points I had from killing Nagash. In the end, it was a really fun game, a big game, tons of models on the table, looked fantastic. And hopefully you got a sense of how overwhelming it appeared when you're looking at these two armies of 4,000 points each sort of staring down your throats. Unfortunately, we didn't see Malekith, Nagash, or the Glotkin in combat. They sort of all sat back kind of tentatively, probably because of just that fear of how many models they were going to have to go up against. The Nagash casting was unbelievably strong, raising up the Terrorgeist and all those Hex race that he was able to raise. Malekith's Incarnate of Shadow ability, that was amazing. Really, allowed me to adjust the movement phase and set the lines that I wanted to. And I said earlier on in the game, as Nagash was raising up people and all those Plague Bearers were being raised up, it seemed like the Elf army was shrinking while everything else was growing. So I think that unless I was able to kill Nagash, the Undead probably would have overpowered the game. In the end, I think I was maybe too cautious with Malekith by sitting back on the Fulcrum. It was, like I said, it was a lot of fun, great game. I'd like to try the same list again, 4,000 points, but maybe one-on-one. Wasn't really a huge fan of the Cane Magic. This is, I think, the second time that we've played it only. But so frustrating when you really need a spell to go off and you can only throw 1 or 2 dice at it. But I guess it does balance out the other downside of the old Magic phase, which was just sort of 6 dicing the big spells. So anyway, lots of fun. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one.